All right, hello people from the internet. Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Nine Settler here with another spell school overview. This time we're doing Air Magic based on the request of the viewers. Um, and before we begin, let me recommend you to speed up the video because I know that I don't speak very fast. If it was up to me, I would speed up the videos a bit before uploading, but I don't generally do that. I don't do any editing with my videos. It's just like one take. I do try to do them properly, but like I don't script them. I do them in one take. I do prepare a bit. For example, in these overviews, I get my lists of spells before starting the video. But that's pretty much about it. Everything else just comes straight out of memory. So with that out of the way, let's begin. Air Magic provides spells to deal damage directly with the wind, as well as noisy but powerful lightning conjurations. It also provides some utility spells, such as a call to the wind to assist your movement or a hex to prevent most use of magic in the area surrounding you. And yeah, the rest is shared among every school. So if you've seen it once, you've seen it all the time. Um, but regardless, Air Magic is interesting. It's not my favorite, but it is decent enough. Like the starting Air Magic background, Air Elementalist, gets Airstrike to begin with, and you can theoretically win the game only using Airstrike. It's not something that is going to be very pleasant, or it may not be very desirable, but it is certainly doable. I would recommend you against it, but if you're, for example, a Jin, Elementalist, and you just don't get anything for experience level 13, 15, 17, 19, you can kinda deal with that by using Airstrike. That's like an extreme scenario. You will most often, or more often than not, just actually get a spell that you want to use as a Jin. Your tastes may vary. I feel like maybe I am a bit too picky, but when I get summoning for like 13, 15, 17, since it's like you're gonna get like some forest and lightning spire and things like that. I don't know. I don't like those. Give me things like cactus giant and haunt. But regardless, this is not the summonings overview. This is the air magic overview. So let's talk about air magic. First on our list, we got shock. So let's go over here. Spell shock. Throws a bouncing bolt of electricity. It partially bypasses armor. Something important to notate about some of these electrocution conjurations, or I think it's all of them, but I'm not sure. Electrocution brand, I think, partially bypasses armor, so it doesn't get reduced the way that other things would get reduced from armor. It gets reduced but less. So it is a pretty good thing for you to like theoretically punch through high armor class monsters. But more often than not, you're gonna be in the receiving end of that like nice thing about electrocution, like shock serpents, spark wasps, that kind of thing can get extremely nasty and can deal a lot of damage to you, even if you have good armor class, because of that property of electrocution and electricity. So yeah, it's not only a thing regarding spells; it is all sources of electric damage. And that's pretty bad. When it comes to this spell, it's a pretty respectable starting spell. It is, I think, the only one of the starting spells that can hit multiple enemies at the same time. And you can also multi-sap it. So it holds a lot of utility, balanced by the relatively poor accuracy, the low damage, but you can bounce it and then the damage just gets better. Yeah, bouncing is an important thing. Shock and lightning bolt you can bounce, and the way that you set up a bounce is well, the game gives you an indicator, and it's like really obvious when you're gonna actually hit the monster twice. You just have to play around with it a bit. You can choose to completely ignore that mechanic, But in order to maximize your damage with shock and lightning bolt, you need to do that kind of thing. So it might be something that you want to look to check out or to learn how to do. Is like really not difficult at all. Really like targeting it in a corner against a monster and moving the cursor around a bit, targeting walls behind the monster will give it to you. It's like as simple as that. You have to be careful with these spells, shock and lightning bolt, because you can hit yourself with them because of that bouncing property. The bouncing thing won't work on metal. It will work on any other wall. It just doesn't work on metal, so you have to keep that in mind. But with that being said, Shock is, in my opinion, a very good, very respectable, very competent level 1 spell. Definitely the killer of Jackals, another random assortment of D1 monsters that just happen to generate close to each other. With this, you actually stand a chance, since you're going to be hurting 3 or 4 monsters at the same time if you shoot in a straight line, as opposed to most other spellcasters that just get to hurt one monster, and it will probably not get to kill one monster in a single cast. Elementalist is like definitely the best for surviving that kind of ridiculous D1 game start ambush. So yeah, there is that. Next on our list we have Static Discharge. Yeah, Static Discharge used to be a level 3 spell. Now it is level 2. Static Discharge releases electrical charges against those next to the caster. These may arc to other adjacent creatures or back to the caster before eventually grounding out. It deals reduced damage when arcing to the caster and bypasses any armor the target may have. This one bypasses armor in its entirety. I didn't know about that. That's a pretty strong property. Yet another spell similar to Freeze and similar to Frozen Vampires that just ignores armor class, evasion, and shield. I like that kind of spell quite a lot, and the existence of those spells is why I consider for Magic to be more powerful than melee. Just like in general, more powerful, more reliable, more damaging, more versatile, more safe, more powerful. Period. The upside that melee has over magic, of course, is that melee is pretty much infinite. It only depends on your HP, where magic depends on your HP and it depends on your mana as well. No mana, no casting, and probably no fighting at that point, unless you happen to have melee. But yeah, regardless, this is not talking about magic versus melee. Maybe I should make that video. This is about Static Discharge. Static Discharge, I am a fan of it. It deals damage to you, so it may not be the safest thing to cast if you're like at like 3 HP, but it is a pretty good thing for those Sadders, those Orc Warriors. It is probably extremely good against Bees or Spriggans, other like high evasion, low HP monsters, without the resistance, of course. Yeah, it is melee ranged, but it has a lot of advantages. So I like Static Discharge quite a lot. I just tend to like conjurations, you know. So it's very difficult for me to have a conjuration that I don't like. So yeah, Static Discharge definitely has my seal of approval. I will almost always rush to get it when I start an Elementalist, and yeah, it's just a very good spell. You might even want to pick it up if you are if you're a character that just happens to stumble upon this early enough in the game. Next on our list, we have Swiftness. Swiftness calls forth winds to greatly increase the caster's movement speed. After the effect ends, the caster's movements will be sluggish for a while. Just walk out, you can leave. Work, social thing, movies, home, class, dentist, close shopping. Okay, that's pretty funny. Oh man, real winners quit. Dang, I didn't know that. I didn't know that this quote existed. I don't think I had ever seen this entry of Swiftness, but that's pretty funny. Oh well, that kind of thing happens. Regardless, going back to the spell, Swiftness is not a spell that I have used a lot, but it is the same kind of spell as Pass Wall. It is the same kind of spell as Passage of Golubria. It is the same kind of spell as Blink. It is just a utility spell that does a thing that it gives you an extra option that you didn't have before learning the spell. So that already is pretty good. The option that you get in this case is moving faster than most of the monsters in the game, and by extension being able to outrun most of the monsters in the game. That is not gonna be permanent, however, because after you are done with the fast effect, you get slowed down for a bit, for a couple of turns. So the way that it works is that it doesn't slow your actions, it only slows your movement, and in a similar vein, it also doesn't speed up your actions, it only speeds up your movement. So the only thing that this is really good for is for running away. However, running away, or like having a way to reliably run away without using consumables, is fantastic in this age of attacks of opportunity. If you are playing stable, you will not get to see them for a couple of months, probably around July, August. Stable for 0.29 is going to release. But yeah, there's attacks of opportunity now. Whenever monsters are next to you and you walk away from them, even if they're not fast, they can still get an attack on you for free and like chase you. So monsters get free attacks now, pretty much, if you try to retreat. And this spell prevents that kind of thing from happening. And so this spell is really good in crawl nowadays. I would say that this is a high priority spell to get. It is also a single school Air Magic spell, and Air Magic is like an okay school to have regardless. So if you have like Shock, if you have Static Discharge, you can for sure consider getting Swiftness, and you will not regret it. It's quite a nice spell. Yeah. Next on our list, we have We have Mephitic Cloud. Okay. It conjures up a short-lived cloud of noxious fumes, which may cause confusion in any creature not resistant to poison. Tougher, more experienced creatures are less likely to be affected. So this checks monster hit dice, which is not shown to the player in any way whatsoever. So that's a funny thing. But you can kind of like figure it out on your own, depending on threat level. You know, extremely dangerous monsters are often monsters that have high hit dice, and so those monsters are unlikely to be severely affected by Meph. Regardless, you get to see the success rate of Meph whenever you're about to cast it, as long as you hover it over a monster. So it's not like you have to look it up. You know how it is with Crawl. All that kind of thing is always displayed to you. It is quite nice in that regard. But regardless, this spell confuses things. The spell is kind of expensive because it's a level 3/3 school spell. You want to get it online by the time you start seeing like Orc Warriors, maybe Cyclopes, Boulder Beetles, Manticores, that kind of thing. If you can cast it when you start seeing those things, this spell is really good for dealing with most of them. You can confuse them, and then you can just wield a dagger of venom or something and just poke at them until they die, taking care to constantly re-meth them so they don't become unconfused and like you are forced into a fight that you probably wouldn't be able to win otherwise. The spell doesn't check armor class, doesn't check evasion, doesn't check shield. So yeah, just like all the check marks. Checking defenses is fantastic on any spell. This spell doesn't directly deal damage, but it does enable you to be able to deal damage and to win fights against monsters that otherwise you wouldn't be able to beat. It's like a hex, but it's actually good because it's a bit more reliable than a hex. You can also preemptively cast it in, like, for example, a corridor, and monsters will walk through it and get confused and just like lose a ton of turns, and then you can just run away. There's a lot of applications for this. You can even use Ignite Poison on Mephitic Cloud and create clouds of fire instead of clouds of Mephitic Cloud. Or you can do a combination of both those things. Cast it, confuse the monsters. And then when the monsters are confused inside the Mephitic Cloud, use Ignite Poison, and now they're confused inside the Cloud of Fire. So they're confused and taking damage, which is quite a nice thing. Quite a good way to get rid of some monsters, especially monsters that are poison resistant or poison immune. Those monsters, of course, wouldn't be confused, but they are still standing on a Cloud of Fire. So yeah, but this is about Mephitic Cloud, not about Ignite Poison. I've already ranted a lot about Ignite Poison in my Transmutations video, which is time-stamped, by the way, in case you only want to hear about the glory of Ignite Poison. The thing is that I usually deviate a lot when I'm talking about a single spell, because you're not going to be using just a single spell for the entirety of the playthrough. So you need to know about these kind of spell combinations, so that you can use the spells at their greatest effectiveness. And I'm just like mentioning some combinations that I personally enjoy. But maybe there's like a lot of combinations that I don't know about because they use spells that I'm not too keen on using more often than not. So you can, of course, figure those out yourself. But yeah, regardless, Mephitic Cloud has my seal of approval. It is good enough that you may actually want to get it on characters that don't start with it, but I don't generally do that. But it is still good regardless. Like, if I have to do it, I wouldn't feel terrible for doing that. It's not a bad spell by any means. Next on our list, we have Airstrike. So yes, I was mentioning, Airstrike causes the air around the creature to twist itself into a whirling vortex of meteorological fury, does more damage to targets surrounded by empty space. So yeah, Airstrike is one of the weakest spells that just deals decent damage to everything. It also has a lot of versatility, because like it's a smite targeted, so if you can see a monster, you can use Airstrike on it. However, depending on the monster's positioning, and the age of positional magic, it may deal more or less damage. So you are incentivized to move the monster around into a position where the monster can take the maximum amount of damage that you can produce with Airstrike. That would be a position where the monster is just not surrounded by any walls, where the monster is completely in the open. So kind of the opposite position where you would want to be casting something like Lightning Bolt or Shock, which is when a monster is in a corridor next to you, kind of next to you, so that the monster doesn't reposition and you lose the double sap. So yeah, positioning is very important with air magic. I feel like air magic is one of the spell schools where the changes with positional magic were the most noticeable. This Airstrike change is quite new. It used to be that Airstrike dealt more damage to flying monsters and to flying players, but that is no longer the case. But regardless, Airstrike is not my favorite spell. I have to say that it is very expensive for the amount of damage that it deals. Even if you have like the ideal setup, it has a very high spell power cap, and if you don't get it high, it doesn't deal good enough damage. But it is kind of usable. It might be a desirable spell against Hydras, because for Hydras you definitely don't want them to be close unless your character is for some reason able to cast something along the lines of Lightning Bolt or Lightning Bolt, let's say, and still be tanky enough to not explode from Hydras. That's a very specific character at the point of the game where Hydras are scary, so it will be very rare that you will get to do such a thing. But Airstrike comes in and saves the day, letting you pretty much burn all your mana to kill that Hydra or severely hurt it and finish it off with like Ice Blast or Acid. So yeah, it has its uses. And you could theoretically use it for the entirety of the game, but it will be painful if you choose to do so. Keep that in mind. This is the kind of like a stepping stone spell, where like it's good, but you kind of want something better as soon as you find something better. And something better might be the next spell that we get to discuss. Well, I guess not the next, but like one of the next spells that we'll get to discuss. Next on our list we have Lightning Spire. Someone constructs a lightning spire in a nearby location that you cannot target. It can fire bouncing bolts of electricity at the caster's foes, but is completely immobile. The strength of the spire depends on spell power. This is a summoning spell. This used to be targetable. This used to be incredibly powerful when it was targetable. It used to have massive amounts of versatility. I have to mention that I didn't really use it a lot back when it was targetable because at the end of the day it is a summon and I'm not a fan of summonings, especially low-level summonings. I like high-level summonings, not low-level summonings. But it got changed a bit with like positional magic a couple of versions ago. Now it gets placed in a random nearby location when you cast it. You don't get to choose where it is. And I do not like that. Not to mention that it also doesn't shoot every turn. So yeah, it's not my favorite spell, definitely. If you like summonings, you might like this one, but I do not like Lightning Spire. So I will pretty much always try my best to not use it, even on characters that are forced into summonings for one reason or another. I'll go out of my way to use Summon Doggy instead of using Lightning Spire, and I'm gonna hope that I find something that is either not a summon or Cactus Giant or Summon Mana Viper, so I can use those instead of using Summon Lightning Spire. I do have to mention that that is very much a player decision. Like my playstyle really shies away from that kind of low-level summon. I just don't like to rely on them. I feel like they're not very reliable. So even though I strongly dislike the spell, I still recommend you to give it a try, so you can form your own opinion on it. Don't only rely on mine. Yeah, that is important to keep in mind. I have the opinion of a character or of a player that has many, many hours of experience in the game. But even then, my opinions are only my opinions. They're not like law. And also, I'm not the greatest player there is, not by a mile. That would probably be Yermak. But I feel like I know what I'm talking about. And more often than not, I'm just like talking about the things that I like and the things that I dislike. Regardless, next on our list, leaving aside Lightning Spire, is going to be a spell that I like quite a lot, which is Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt fires a mighty bolt of lightning. Who could have guessed? Its damage partially bypasses armor, and it can be bounced off walls to hit targets twice. This spell is just like Shock, but bigger. It deals more damage. It deals significantly more damage actually, and it makes significantly more noise. It is one of the loudest spells in the game, as opposed to Shock, which is relatively quiet. But yeah, like this spell is pretty good. The damage, as you can see, there's only one dice. You can make that two dice if you bounce it, but it can get very high. It can be like one dice of like 100 or so, something absolutely ridiculous at very high power. So yeah, this spell has a lot of strengths, but it also has a lot of weaknesses. The damage is very unreliable because of that one dice, two dice if you choose to bounce. But the strengths are it's like the last true bolt spell that remains in the game. Can be multi-sapped, or you can multi-sap with it. I mean, bypasses monster armor class. It doesn't bypass monster evasion, but it does bypass monster shield. So you should probably not even bother trying doing this against like Spriggans or so, because you're probably not gonna do very well. There's certainly much better spells for dealing with that kind of low HP, high evasion monster that Air Magic has. I think that the next spell, no, not the next spell, but like soon we'll be talking about one of those that I'm not too much of a fan of, but like you can definitely use it for dealing with those monsters. When it comes to Lightning Bolt, it's respectable. I also think of it as a stepping stone spell. where like you want to get it and you will probably use it a bit, but eventually you'll want to replace it for something higher level or something that doesn't require as much of a setup as Lightning Bolt does. Because at the end of the day, the damage is going to be extremely unreliable unless you bounce the spell. It's just how it is. Next on our list we have Freezing Cloud. We have Freezing Cloud. Freezing Cloud conjures up a large cloud of lethally cold vapor. I already talked about this one in my Ice Magic overview, so if you want to go check that out, I would appreciate it. It is time-stamped as well, so you can just click on the spell if you choose to learn more about Freezing Cloud. But just as a bit of a resume, I like this spell quite a lot. I feel like it has a pretty good combination with Mystic Blast, just like cast Freezing Cloud, let the monster, well, not let the monsters come to you, but like do other things, and then when the monsters are too close, just Mystic Blast them away into the clouds so they have to get to you again. And there's very few monsters that can actually survive that kind of thing. So yeah, Mystic Blast and Freezing Cloud synergize quite well. They're kind of expensive. That's level 4 on translocations and level 5 on conjurations, ice, and they're alongside around 10 spellcasting or so. So that's kind of expensive, but it is very powerful. That's a combination that I like quite a bit. Whenever I get to use it, I don't feel terrible. It feels quite nice to use that combination. And I like this spell, just like period. It is a spell that also has my seal of approval, even though I don't get to use it that much, because level 5 3 school spell. With that amount of experience, you usually get to learn other higher level spells, such as, for example, also Kubus Refrigeration. If you have access to Refrigeration, Freezing Cloud is kind of like not that appealing. Still kind of pretty good, because of course it doesn't have the downside of Refrigeration, but not as appealing regardless. Next on our list, we have Conjurable Lightning. That's what we got. Conjurable Lightning creates a pack of ball lightnings, which seek out the nearest enemy before exploding in a huge blast of electricity. Casters are advised to use caution. Lightning is not mindful of what it may hit. The magic which keeps ball lightnings cohesive has limited range, so they may dissipate harmlessly if allowed to drift too far away from their caster before exploding. This spell is not one of my favorite spells. Theoretically, the damage of this is absolutely off the charts and ridiculous, because every ball lightning deals pretty okay damage. You can see there that at 0% power, it creates 3 ball lightnings, which each deal 3 dice of 6. That's at 0% power. The spell power can increase quite a lot, so like you can theoretically get it to 3 dice of 30 each ball lightning rather easily, and then that's a spell, a level 6 spell that deals 9 dice of 30. But that 9 dice of 30 can very easily get you low enough that the fight becomes very dangerous to you. So it is not a spell that I would like use on every fight. I feel like this spell is only something that you would use against monsters that are very strong against other spells that you may have, such as, for example, if you have a bunch of spells that check armor class, and you, or like not armor class, sorry, a bunch of spells that check evasion, and you're fighting against a bunch of Spriggans. This spell is fantastic for that. But it's not something that you want to use on every fight. That's just my personal opinion. I don't like this spell that much because of the self-damage aspect of it. I feel like it's quite significant, so whenever possible I try not to use this one. Going for cheaper, in my opinion, more effective options, such as Irradiate. But yeah, it is usable. It's just not a spell that suits my tastes quite much, which is surprising because it's a conjuration spell. But I don't like the self-damage. I'm not a fan of it. Even with resistance to electricity, the self-damage can get very much out of control if you start using it every fight. Also, the noise is significant. It is as loud as lightning bolt, and that is pretty bad because it means that it will attract a lot of monsters. This spell has a lot of red flags, in my opinion. It makes a lot of noise, it attracts a lot of monsters, it deals damage to you. So what's gonna happen is that you're gonna be attracting a lot of monsters to you when you're low on HP because you're dealing damage to yourself with CBL. It's a combination that I'm not a fan of personally, but give it a try. Um, Regardless, next on our list we have. Hmm, next on our list we have MCC. Maxwell's capacitive coupling. This one is new. Hmm. Gradually builds up electric charge in the caster so long as they maintain focus by waiting in place and not taking any other actions. When threshold is reached, the charge couples with the nearest foe, vaporizing them instantly. Higher spell power will allow the caster to accumulate charge more rapidly. This spell is familiar to some of you who got to see Absolute Zero. This is kind of the fixed version of Absolute Zero. It is still very strong. I've used it, and I like it quite a bit. It's not a spell that I will always go for, but it is quite good indeed. Pretty good for dealing with strong single targets. You know, just like the same things that you used to kill with Absolute Zero. It's just that now it requires a bit more planning and thinking and setup instead of just, oh, I just press my quiver and now set above his death, which was what like Absolute Zero did, and no one really liked because it was ridiculously overpowered. Obviously, this one forces you to, you know, play the game instead of just pressing a button, and for that reason I like MCC. If I feel like if a version of that effect needs to exist in the game, like the effect of just one-shotting a monster, this has to be the proper way to do such a thing. um, so yeah, no monsters can get this obviously because player insta kills don't exist in crawl apart from like unlucky effects such as paralysis and shafts, that kind of thing. So monsters don't get MCC. I feel like monsters could theoretically get it. Like personally, when it comes from or like thinking strictly from a balance perspective, I think monsters could get MCC. Obviously, like level appropriate monsters. It's very easy for the player to just play around that. Summon an ally in front of the monster, let the ally be fried instead of the player. Uh, Silence the monster, interrupt the channeling in some way, Mystic Blast, File of Lots, Silence. There's a lot that could be done with monsters with this spell, but it will most likely never be in the game because of the whole thing of player insta kills not being cool. And I'm okay with that personally. I also don't like player insta kills. Um, Regardless, this spell is quite good. If you happen to get that much magic, it is not like a waste of spell slots. It is not a spell that you can use to kill everything. Definitely not. Absolutely not. But it is a spell for some high profile targets. Even if you don't go do extended, you can still use it against Orbs of Fire. You can use it against Ancient Liches. You can use it against um, Killer Clowns, maybe, if they don't blink away too much. Mm, you can use them against you can use it against Panlords in the off run if they're not obscenely dangerous. Don't use this against a Panlord with Torment and Damnation because you're gonna get yourself killed by waiting for it to channel. Do think about how to use this. This spell is very difficult to use, but it is very powerful and very rewarding if you choose to use it and you use it right. Use it in the right situations. Try to isolate the monsters whenever you are casting the spell. Try to reduce your line of sight as much as possible. If you cast it in a kill hole, it's like the ideal situation where you can literally only see one monster. And you can literally only see one tile, and the monster that you want to kill is standing on that tile. So, like, if the monster wants to hit you, and the monster wants to hit you, the monster needs to be standing on that tile. That's how you use MCC at its best, by doing that. Obviously, I understand that it's not always possible, but do think about setting up that kind of situation if you have a lot of a lot of time to do such a thing. But regardless, let's go for the final spell in our list. Air Magic doesn't have that many spells. The final spell on our list is gonna be Chain Lightning. Chain Lightning releases a massive electrical discharge that arcs to the creature nearest the caster and then outward from it. Further it travels, the less damage it does. Secondary arcs have limited range and do little damage to the caster. Spell's damage partially bypasses armor and resistance to electricity. This spell is incredibly powerful. However, I have to say that the spell suffers from exactly the same issue that Ball Lightning does. It does a ton of damage to you if you cast it like 5 or 6 times per fight. It also produces incredible amounts of noise. So same issue than with Ball Lightning. From the level 9 spells, this is probably like one of my least favorite. Leaving aside Dragon's Call, not a fan of Dragon's Call personally. But yeah, from the conjurations, this is like my least favorite. I also am not a fan of Death's Door that much. I mean, it's not a strong utility spell, of course, but I don't like it. I like my level spells to be more like Firestorm and Shatter and Polar Vortex than like Death's Door. But yeah, this is about Chain Lightning, not about Death's Door. Chain Lightning, regardless of my dislike for it, is still really, really powerful. You can definitely kill whatever you want casting this enough. The thing is that you may not get to do such a thing because of the self-damage component. Yeah, the self-damage component is a bit too much on this spell. I really have no idea why that self-damage is there, because this is a level 9 spell. I kind of understood it when it was a level 8 spell, but yeah, as a level 9, I feel like it shouldn't deal self-damage. Other level 9s, such as Firestorm, Shatter, Polar Vortex, don't have that massive downside. This one does. This one also has the additional downside of being Conjuration Air. So that's like a dual school level 9. That's among the most expensive things that you can get in the game. A dual school level 9 spell. For that amount of experience, you can get, like, theoretically, on a character that didn't train any conjurations, you could get like a Shatter and Polar Vortex for the same cost of getting Chain Lightning. Think about that. That's just a bit too expensive for it to have a downside, in my opinion. But regardless, it is still very usable. It's just that I will almost never go for this one. When I take a character to Extended, I get Firestorm, I get Shatter, I get Polar Vortex, but I don't get Chain Lightning. I seldom get any air magic, actually. Despite the fact that I like the background, I think the higher level spells are somewhat lackluster. Apart from MCC, MCC was cool. So yeah, I don't have much else to say about Chain Lightning. I feel like yet again you should give it a try on your own and like form your own opinion, because I may not like it, but you may like it. So yeah. With that being said, I think that's it for all the air magic spells. Oh, I missed one. Oh, okay. I'm glad that I noticed. I missed a very important air magic spell that I actually like quite a bit. So let's check the final air magic spell. Yeah, I forgot about this one. This one is air magic. Silence. Okay, let me tell you about Silence. It eliminates all sound near the caster. This makes reading scrolls, casting spells, invoking divine abilities, or shouting impossible in the caster's vicinity. The spell's oppressive, unnatural effect will greatly hamper stealth, because you're kind of gonna freak out if you cannot listen to yourself breathing. That's why it greatly hampers the stealth. Certain monsters have innate magical or special abilities which will still be usable when silenced. Many monsters can do things while they're silenced. Dragons, draconians can use breath weapons while silenced. Um, Rupert can berserk while silenced. In my opinion, that's absurd, but that's certainly a thing that can happen. Um, all demons can cast while silenced. Um, and so on. There's like many monsters that are completely unaffected or partially unaffected by silence. So you can check that. Whenever you inspect a monster, the game will tell you which is unaffected by silence or which is affected by anti-magic but not silence or like whatever it is. The game tells you. Mm, the effect starts out with a radius depending on power, which will then shrink, eventually covering only the caster before it times out. So for a couple of turns you will be silenced while nothing else is silenced. That's an important downside about silence. Silence is a high risk but extremely high reward spell. The high risk is, of course, you being unable to cast any spells, but most importantly, being unable to use escape options, defensive abilities. You cannot read scrolls. You cannot pray to your god. You cannot do a lot of things when you are affected by silence. On the other hand, the monsters also cannot do many things, and it turns out that you can kind of build around silence. You can build around being silenced. You can build around producing the silence effect. Monsters always are the same. A demonologist, a deep of demonologist, will not suddenly appear with blade and a plus 12 I don't know, Brodax or something, ready to fight you while silenced. No, it will most likely be wearing robe and a short sword, and it will hit you for like 3 damage while you completely destroy it because it cannot cast the spells. Same goes for sorcerers, same goes for many elves. In fact, silence is one of my MVP spells for doing elf. This spell is fantastic also for SOT. Very good for dealing with draconian bands, very good for dealing with leeches, very bad for some things as well. So you have to keep that in mind. Very bad for Orb Guardians. Of course, it literally doesn't do anything to Orb Guardians. There's nothing to silence when it comes to those guys. Killer Clowns also are completely unaffected by this. I think the blinking is completely passive. And also the throwing of clown pies is not affected by silence. But yeah, you have to know against which monsters this is good and against which monsters this is bad. And against the monsters that it is good is one of the strongest effects. It pretty much neutralizes many monsters. Many spellcasters are absolutely dumpstered by silence. So yeah, very difficult to use. Not for all characters. Definitely not for all characters. But the characters that can make use of silence can be true powerhouses. Yeah. Try it on a demigod. I feel like demigod is the master of casting level 5, level 6 spells wearing plate armor, so it has decent amounts of armor class and also decently high power spells or like high level spells. So silence is not so scary when you build around it, as I mentioned earlier, and demigod is very good at doing so. So yeah. But that's actually the final spell. I'm surprised that I almost missed it because I like this spell. I like it more than I like Chain Lightning. I think I've been given many moments of true joy with this spell. Um, so yeah, give it a try. If you have to try only one of the spells that I've talked about today, try this one. This one is so good. But do keep in mind that, as I mentioned, it's not a spell for every character, and it can be very dangerous to use. So use it responsibly. Don't cast it in every situation and then be sad because you died because you were silenced. I've almost been there in that specific situation a couple of times. So yeah, don't be like that because it's quite sad to die as a result of a spell that you cast yourself. But regardless, that's gonna be it for me today. Thank you for listening to this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the content of this video, you should consider subscribing on YouTube, following on Twitch, maybe even subscribing on Twitch. It does help a lot if you choose to do so. Or just check out some of my other videos. I have many of these. It's like a series right now. I'm gonna do every school. Gonna leave necromancy for last. Hopefully by the time I get to it, the rework of necromancy will already be going, and I will have already tested it. Fingers crossed. But yeah, with that being said, do consider giving Crawl a try if you somehow stumbled upon this and got to the end and you have never experienced Crawl. I don't think that will be the case, but do give Crawl a try. Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup is a beautiful game, and I like it a lot. But yeah, that's all I have to say. See you around, and thank you for watching my video. Have a nice one.